Welcome to Takeover, the most underrated sports debate show on YouTube. Guys, we are back in the studio. How does it feel? We've been from struggle set to struggle set. We've been from classroom to classroom. We've been on Zoom, and we've gone full circle. We have made it back, and we're back on a week where college football is coming back, and the NFL is right around the corner.
There isn't a better time to come back, Cam. And as you guys all know, my name is Josh.
My name is Deandra.
It's your boy Cam, and this is Takeover.
Yo, hey champ. Yo, we play it all in night. Yeah, need it all in advance. The opposition know we're ready for it. Like a supper we eating, it won't be the last. Grind out the muscle, pull up. Parker right on the grass. We coming in, take over everything, run it up. Not that holding me back. 3 in the wood, rushing. I don't like Dutch, don't even matter, you know I'm facing. When I roll a paper, I like to go double. Run up a check, flip a W, make it an M. I need a couple.
All right, so there's been a slew of quarterback battles across the NFL, mostly between younger quarterbacks and the veterans. So we'll ask this question today, and it may hit it close to home to some of you since we are in Georgia. Is it time that the Falcons move on from Matt Ryan?
How do I say this politely? Absolutely not. There are a multitude of reasons that I could go into. I'm going to try to not, take up too much time here. But let's keep it this way. Typically, when you want to move on from a quarterback, it's because they've had some decrease in their production. So, for example, Cam Newton. The Patriots cut Cam Newton because he threw 8 touchdowns and 10 interceptions last year, and because he hasn't looked like himself for nearly a half decade. Right? That's why you move on from a quarterback. And Matt Ryan is still perfectly great NFL quarterback. If you have a car that isn't starting and you know it's the battery, why would you then go and change the oil? Or why would you go and take off the tires? There are other things that you need to fix in this car for it to truly be great. Matt Ryan's never had a fantastic offensive line that's safe for a few seasons. He's never really had a good defense. And more often than not, he's had relatively incompetent play callers and head coaches that just weren't going anywhere. He's been a lame duck quarterback half the time because they don't give him the proper tools to succeed. And even when they don't give him the proper tools, he's putting up numbers. He is an MVP. He hasn't thrown for less than 4,000 yards since 2011, and he hasn't thrown for less than 20 touchdowns since 2009. He's only had 2 years with 15 or more interceptions, and both of those years, the Falcons just absolutely sucked. And so I'd be willing to bet a lot of them were just bad balls because he had no time to throw. He's only missed 3 games in his career. Sometimes the best ability is availability. Matt Ryan's only missed because of turf toe, and I think he turned his ankle one time. Matt Ryan stays healthy. Matt Ryan delivers the ball. He always has a high completion percentage. I think he's led the NFL in completions at least last year, maybe the last 2 years. Why would we take him? Why would we get rid of him? What is the point of getting rid of him? And then that leads into the other problem of who's he going to be replaced with? What is the better option here? Are we going to go out and we're going to get Cam Newton? Is it Brandon Allen? Is that who we're really looking at right now? Are we going to go sign Tim Tebow and have him have a career resurgence at 35 years old as a quarterback? I don't think so. So even if Matt Ryan, even if it was close to his time in the sun, there's nobody else left to take him out unless you really believe in Josh Rosen, which frankly I don't. So Matt Ryan should stay as long as he wants, not only for what he's done with the franchise, but because he's still a top 10 NFL quarterback.
Top 10 and great. The words you use to describe him are very interesting. I honestly think Matt Ryan is a good quarterback, but he's a bad quarterback for what you guys are trying to build. If you look at what the Falcons have been doing, when you look at weapons on the offensive side, they've taken the Kansas City approach. We want to have all of our weapons, and we want to beat you from the outside. You guys in the past have had receiver cores of Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu. You guys have had Calvin Ridley out there, and now look what you guys have now. You guys have Calvin Ridley, and you have your new guy, Kyle Pitts. How confident are you that Matt Ryan can connect on those vertical routes with those type of guys? You said yourself, Matt Ryan's the same guy to throw that old car, just throw it in the air. Who's gonna get it? Are you gonna waste the primes of Kyle Pitts and guys of his nature like Calvin Ridley on short routes the whole entire time? You're turning your vertical threats into medium routes. So I think that's going to be a problem that you guys are going to come into. And you saw that with Julio Jones. I think Julio Jones left because I mean, I can only use half of my route tree if I'm only catching slants from Matt Ryan. And the other thing that
you know something about only slants, right?
For sure, with Drew Brees. That's why the Saints ended up being so stagnant. I'm glad that you brought that up. And another thing I'll bring up, you talk about Matt Ryan's greatness. When I think about Matt Ryan being great, I think of 2 seasons primarily. When he took y'all to the Super Bowl and the 2013 season when he took y'all to the NFC Championship. 2 things were common in both of those seasons. Matt Ryan had a run game, whether it was Michael Turner or it was Devontae Freeman. You laugh at Michael Turner, but he scored 10 touchdowns that season. He was very potent, and you guys can move the ball. I don't think when the game is solely based on Matt Ryan, and you have to give the ball to Matt Ryan 100% of the time, he won't be able to. He's not that guy. I think you have to have a run game with Matt Ryan for him to succeed, kind of like you have to have with Ryan Tannehill. And I also think he has a tendency to hold the ball a little too long. You know, you would say, well, he's holding the ball too long, Cam, because, you know, and he's getting sacked because we don't have a good offensive line, and our receivers aren't open. But at the same time, is that going to be the end-all, be-all? Deshaun Watson's offensive line isn't that great, but he gets it done. You look at RG3 back in 2013, only memorable offensive lineman they had was Trent Williams, and he still got it done. And then you look at Kansas City in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes being chased for his life, and he was still being able to make passes. Matt Ryan can't do those things. You look at Jalen Hurts going into the game versus the New Orleans Saints. This is the Saints team that sacked Matt Ryan 10 times the game before. And Jalen Hurts goes in there and wins because he's mobile. He can move around. So maybe it's time for a mobile quarterback in Atlanta. And then you look at the division Matt Ryan is in. He's in a division with the New Orleans Saints. He's in there with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How confident are you that he's going to be able to crack the top 2 in that division with those teams, what they have on the defensive side of the ball? I feel like if the Falcons are going to be more potent, you have to get a guy who can improvise. If you have a bad offensive line, you have to get a guy who's going to be able to counter that. Matt Ryan can't counter that. So it's not that he's a bad quarterback. Matt Ryan just isn't good anymore. He's not good for the system and the situation that you have. So I think you need something better. And in my opinion, I think it's time for a new face in Atlanta anyway, because Matt Ryan's not box office. You got to give the fans in Atlanta something to really cheer about. You think about in the basketball season with Trae Young, that was a new face Atlanta was excited to see. Matt Ryan, when you come to football season in Atlanta, it's so dead. We have no pulse here. So I feel like you maybe need a new face. Get something new, put someone new back there, you know, make something happen.
So I believe that it is time to move on from Matt Ryan, and it might not be as feasible now because they restructured his contract, but I do believe his window of success is closing. Like you said, Cameron, the way they're building now, they're basically going for a win-now situation, being that they restructured his contract and they went out and got Kyle Pitts. But Matt Ryan doesn't really remind me of a win-now quarterback. Don't get me wrong. Like you said, he's a good quarterback. He has a good processor and he's accurate, but he doesn't remind me of that quarterback that can elevate a team. So you may see some quarterbacks that can elevate their team even when they don't have the best of talent. Matt Ryan, to me, just isn't that. He's the type of quarterback that he needs things around him in order to really play at an elite level. And in my opinion, I feel like you guys should have drafted a younger quarterback from the draft, simply because you don't know if you're ever going to be able to draft that high again, or you don't know if the next quarterback class coming from the draft is going to be as good as it was this year. And when you guys look at what you're doing now with the build now type of thing or the win now type of thing, y'all could have really had the best of both worlds really. You could have had a younger quarterback for cheaper, and he could have sat behind Matt Ryan and learned from Matt Ryan, and then it might have, you know, put some fire under Matt Ryan to play better, because he would have known that he would have been replaced at any given moment. And then also, like I said, you get the best of both worlds. If you get a younger quarterback, he can watch and learn, but also when you're done with Matt Ryan or it's time for Matt Ryan to go, you will already have a good team ready to go for him because you have been building this whole time. So I'm not saying that, obviously, like I said, you can't get rid of him now because of the contract, but I do believe you guys should have looked more in the future and prepared more for the future rather than just putting in all your money on Matt Ryan.
We already had the money on Matt Ryan. We restructured so we could actually sign extra people. And I don't like this idea of we could do the best of both worlds, because if we did take Justin Fields, say at number 4, so then Matt Ryan gets to come out and he has a receiving core of Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, and Olamide Zaccheaus.
Isn't he a great quarterback?
Tajay Sharp.
Isn't he a great quarterback?
He's a great quarterback.
So why can't Drew Brees do it?
I'm saying having Kyle Pitts is even better.
So why can't Drew? So I'm just saying, if he's as good as you say, why can't he do more with less like everyone else?
Well, he's 37.
So he had a quarterback. He had a quarterback older than him doing the exact same thing.
He was throwing slants, but Listen, Matt Ryan.
What
is
is
still
Matt
a
Ryan throwing
fantastic
interceptions?
quarterback.
And Matt Ryan's throwing interceptions. Like, what do you like? I'm just saying, like, what do you
plus
expect
I
from
said
He had
Slade?
26 and 14 last year, Cam.
Plus, I said in my take, while you have that younger quarterback, Matt Ryan would still be there, obviously.
Yeah.
So you still have that win now type of thing. We would still be able to see what Matt Ryan could do because you say he's a great quarterback.
He's a fantastic quarterback.
But
He's
exactly,
a good quarterback.
So this is
Matt
what I'm
Ryan is
saying.
not
But what I'm
fantastic.
saying is
He's
when
not
you have
fantastic.
that young quarterback there, he can learn, and then you would still be able to build while Matt Ryan is still there and while you still have a
It
younger
sounds great,
quarterback.
but we really can't build because we have so much money not only tied up in Matt, but Deion Jones, Grady Jarrett, and we did have money tied up in Julio until he jumped ship. But anyway, the other thing I want to point out is y'all are talking about how your main criticism that I've always seen with Matt Ryan is he doesn't get it done even when he doesn't have the greatest supporting talent. The problem is that kind of quarterback is like 1 out of 20. There's a very few quarterbacks out there that can truly make a good team out of a bad or subpar to mediocre supporting cast. Those are the Patrick Mahomes and the Russell Wilsons and the Aaron Rodgers of the world. And those people are not a dime a
Deshaun
dozen.
Watson.
Deshaun Watson didn't do anything last year. 4-12.
Okay, because it's
That's
best,
exactly
because
what
his
Matt
best
Ryan
receiver
was.
left. You have Julio Jones. You have
Julio Jones only played 7
You
games
have
last year, and he wasn't healthy at
Okay, I'm talking about the
all.
last 3 seasons. Have y'all made the playoffs the last 3 seasons?
No, but
that's what I'm saying.
He
So what are you
had no
talking
defense
about?
neither.
What are you, okay.
And he didn't have an offensive line. So, and then the problem with you bring up with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's a mobile quarterback, so it's different. He can get out of the pocket.
What about
Matt
Brady?
Ryan isn't a mobile quarterback.
Brady had no weapons.
That's where
Brady
the
had no
scheme goes
weapons.
through. So see, this is
That's why. Look, you're making my
nibbling
point.
around the issue.
No,
but
you're
the
making my
problem
point
is-
because he's bad for the system you have. You can't have a
Why don't we
passer
change
with
the
a bad
system?
offensive line.
Why don't we change the system?
You asked me. I'm
why
looking
don't we
at the-
change
I'm
the
looking at the
system?
film.
This is why Matt Ryan isn't the problem. The problem was Dirk Cutter because Dirk Cutter was calling all these terrible plays and not accentuating the strengths that he had. He was attempting to do all this extra stuff that Matt Ryan wasn't necessarily capable of at that time. So that's the biggest problem. It's not Matt Ryan. It's everything else that's been around him. Matt Ryan has never done anything wrong. Matt Ryan has showed up every day in
But
and
he
day
doesn't
out
elevate
and
either.
never
He's not that
complained.
good or he's not that bad.
He sure
He's
could
right in the
elevate us in
middle.
2016, but it's all good.
To where?
To the Super Bowl
18-30 last 3 seasons as your starting quarterback.
with no
On
defense.
to our next topic. The college football season has officially started. And there's going to be a week 1 matchup of Georgia and Clemson that has serious playoff implications because I believe that is number 3 versus number 5. So it poses the question, guys. Whoever loses this game, are they out of the playoff picture?
Well, I won't say, well, I'm going to start with Georgia first. I don't believe that with the loss they would necessarily be kicked out of the playoffs. I believe it's situational, especially when it comes to college football. So a couple scenarios I look at, when you look at the first thing, okay, if Georgia beats Clemson, right, they could basically afford any other loss on their schedule. And if they win the SEC championship or the conference championship, they can basically still have a chance to make it to the playoffs. But if Georgia loses to Clemson, the way that they can still get into the championship or make it to the playoffs is if they run the table, basically win the rest of their games and win the SEC championship. But that will be really difficult because they are in the SEC. But on to Clemson, I believe that Clemson has a lot of pressure coming into this game because in hindsight, really, because their schedule is so easy, they could really run the table, really, outside of the game with Georgia, right? But the reason why I say there's a lot of pressure is because, let's say, if Georgia beats Clemson, right? Even if Clemson runs the table, wins all their games, and including the ACC championship, I don't see a situation where they get in over a Georgia team that has beaten Clemson and won the SEC championship. So that's why I feel like there's more pressure on Clemson. But I will say that I think Georgia needs this game because, you know, they're not really known for winning those matchups where, you know, they face a really high caliber team. But that's my take on it.
I think it's I think it's a case by case thing. I don't think that there's a blanket answer for it. If Clemson loses, man, I'd argue they have to run the table to even have a conversation. And even then, I mean, I don't think anybody's really going to touch Oklahoma. Nobody's touching OSU. And then whoever wins the SEC is probably, you know, guaranteed a seat. So there's one more seat left. And what happens if somebody in the Pac-12 plays super well and becomes is an undefeated conference winner? You know, what if Cincinnati comes through and is again undefeated and you don't want to deny them again? And there's also the SEC runner-up that you can make an argument for, especially if it's Georgia, because if Georgia beats Clemson and then has another argument for the fourth side, you have to argue that Georgia's over Clemson Because in the end, Clemson's not going to lose to anybody in the ACC. The ACC is not that great of a conference. They have a bunch of solid, mediocre teams. I think after this game, the next biggest game that Clemson has is either NC State or FSU. I don't think any of those are really going to get the attention of anybody. So if Clemson loses, I'd argue they're almost out. If Georgia loses, they're still hunting. If they beat Auburn and or Florida, then, well, they have to beat both. If they beat both, then they're right back in the seat. And if they win the SEC, it's guaranteed, I would argue. Anybody that wins the SEC is guaranteed to get in because it's the best college football conference. So Georgia, they don't have as much at stake. I agree with you in that it would be nice for them to show up on this primetime stage, but it is the first game of the season, and they do have 2 other opportunities where they could beat like an upper tier SEC school that would put them up on that pedestal. So even if Georgia loses, I think they're still in the hunt. But if Clemson loses, a whole lot of things are gonna have to break right for them to make it.
And I completely agree with you. I feel like this is a must-win first game for Clemson just because of the weakness of their schedule and how the ACC really isn't as looked at as high as the SEC. But when you talk about Georgia, would you, because you guys said if they lose this game, they'll get another chance. In the SEC championship, they're most likely going to play an Alabama team. Would you put a 2-loss Georgia team in the playoff?
No.
No. That's why I said it depends.
So are you banking on
them to win the SEC championship too if they lose this game?
I'm saying if they win the SEC championship, they're guaranteed.
Yeah.
And they also have Auburn and Florida. And they would still be in the hunt. But then if they lose the SEC title, I would still argue they might have an argument over Clemson because they beat Clemson.
Right.
And Clemson hasn't beaten anybody on the caliber of Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, I was saying if they lose to Clemson in that situation, they would have to win the SEC championship, in my opinion, and probably try or win all of their games just to have a fight to get to the playoffs or try to go to the playoffs.
All right, and lastly, who you guys got? Saturday, 7 o'clock. Who you got?
Have I ever been one to pick Georgia? Come on. It's going to be Clemson.
I'm going to pick Georgia.
Please.
I'm actually going to pick Georgia.
Georgia has no receivers. This is
I'm going to go Clemson
all
too.
The way.
And that is going to wrap up our episode for today, guys. Do you guys have anything to say?
I want you to stop what you're doing. I know this was a bit of a long episode, but I know you're probably super excited about the fact that we're back in the studio. Scroll down, hit that big red button that says subscribe, and then next to it on the bell, hit the all so that you know whenever we drop a weekly banger, because we do this every week. And as Cam said, we're the most underrated sports debate show on YouTube because we're the best sports debate show on YouTube, and yet it's great.
Don't forget to send in some takes, guys, because we really want to react to you guys. And also, we got
y'all crazy.
Alrighty, but we also got some big things coming too. So stay tuned, y'all. Stay tuned.
All right, that's gonna wrap up our episode. I'll see you guys next time. Takeover out.
Hey, champ. Yeah, we play it all in night. Yeah, need it all in advance. The opposition know we're ready for it. Like a supper we eating, it won't be the last. Grind all the muscle, pull up. Parker right on the grass. We coming in, take over everything, run it up. Nothing holding me back. 3 in the wood, rushing. I don't like Dutch, don't even matter, you know I'm a face. And when I roll a paper, I like to go double. Run up a check, flip a W, make it an M. I need